This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on. No choice, but you got a man to get on. And welcome to the best hour or so in the universe. It's Reasonable Doubt. Mark Garrigus is in studio.
Yeah, and having fun. And to continue our conversation just briefly, because we got jam-packed topics today. Adam and I were talking as we put the headsets on that we're both busier than we've ever been. Would you agree? Yeah. And Adam, how did you characterize it? You're just trying to fund the sedentary lifestyle that surrounds you?
Yes, I'd say that's a... people always would say to me, I would say this answer all the time. They would go, well, when are you going to have enough? Or when's enough? Or, why do you have 10 jobs? And when are you going to be comfortable? And I say, when I can afford to live the life that my family lives, then I will be comfortable.
And so
now, I cannot afford their lifestyle.
I did a description of my morning, which I won't repeat because I want to not get my throat slit when I'm asleep. But you had a pretty good line that or a concept that I hadn't thought of. What did you say? You only want to get how many? I'm not looking for 50 cents on my dollar. I'm looking for pennies on my dollar. I'd be happy with 7.5% of my dollar, right?
I mean, imagine, you talk to some of these people, it's crazy. There's the people that have the kids that are, on Disney and crushing it and bringing home big fat paychecks. And then you also have these guys, like when you talk to Dr. Bruce, his son goes online, but sells stuff. I don't even know how it works, but the kid's raking in the bucks, and he's been doing it since he was 15.
Yeah.
His son has one of the biggest meme accounts out there.
Really?
Yeah, like he met with the Fuck Jerry guys and told them to go pound sand.
Wow.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Sonny's buying some pay-per-view right now at home.
And I'm begging Jake when he's ordering Adidas shoes to please buy me a pair at the same time. I'm trying to get all I'm trying to get is dollar for dollar what he spends.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, try it. Anyway, I wanted to start off with, because I thought this was fascinating, and it's a different take than I think is uniform. This is the week of impeachment. And the chamber that I was in, the legal chamber, is, I think, as we speak right now, the impeachment defense is just starting. Because we're taping this on Friday. But during this week, I think roundly criticized has been the president's lawyers as the worst presentation of all time, and and kind of universal adulation about the House managers. Would you say that's a characterization of the chambers?
It's funny. I turned on CNN after the first round, and they were like, the president's attorneys are the worst of all time, and then I went, all right, I better go listen. I better go over to Fox and see if that's true. And they agreed.
Yeah.
So when Fox is in unison with CNN, then it's unanimous.
So I'm going to push back on the consensus.
Although I heard some of today's as I was driving in on the radio. Today seemed more competent.
Well, this is what I went back and because unfortunately I have a day job and I'm on Zoom court calls all day, or Zoom hearings, especially this week. But I went back and I looked at the YouTube specifically of the gentleman who was a former prosecutor, which he made sure to tell the chamber. But if you take a look at his presentation as opposed to the House manager's presentation, which the House managers get bonus points for being choreographed because they use the audio-visual. Mr. Castor, I think is his name, did not. Castor, to my mind, the evidence was that he clearly was a much more skilled lawyer. He got up, he talked without notes, he told anecdotes, he looked at his audience. In terms of presentation, I don't necessarily... if I'm telling young lawyers to watch this and be more like House managers as opposed to the defense, no, I'm going to take a contrarian view here. Castor And you can argue all you want about style and substance. And I've had this for years, these arguments with other lawyers where they want kind of a bombastic closing and they want me doing what I do. And a lot of times I think while that works in an opening statement, which is not supposed to be an argument, an opening statement, you're supposed to give coming attractions. I think that by the time you get to a closing statement, the evidence is all there. You're not going to change people's minds. And what you need to do is just arm the people who are with you with arguments to make once they're deliberating. That's really what a closing statement is. And so I disagree with kind of this was the greatest opening of all time. By the way, nothing about this resembles real life. And let me explain why also. First of all, people yesterday were saying Ted Cruz, Josh, I think it was Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, and somebody else were meeting with the defense lawyers. And they outrage. I cannot believe Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham are meeting with the defense lawyers. A juror could never do that. Okay, yeah. But guess what? Victims and the House managers are victims under any definition of a insurrection. They don't get to prosecute you. And guess what? If there's a murder down at Western and the 5 freeway, we don't hold the trial at the crime scene. So don't talk to me as if we can import real life trial things to this. This is political theater at its best.
Well, I have a couple thoughts. One is I think the problem, and now whenever I eat something, I think about Vinny. And whenever I hear something about a lawyer, I think about Mark Garrigus. And I think when Trump's attorney...
And you think a lot more about Vinny than me. So, yeah,
well, I eat more than I think about the law. But,
right.
But when he complimented Raskin on his presentation, I winced a little bit. Like I felt like, oh, Mark would not like the compliment to your opponent, essentially. And I think maybe I didn't comb through the whole thing, but I think that's where the initial pushback was in terms of him
It's
doing
exactly right. Style points. And he was trying to be. And look, by the way, when people, this is another irritating thing. People were saying, what's the matter? Did Trump get an assigned public defender? Hey, whoa. Public defenders, I've always said on this show, are some of the best lawyers around. These guys are both former prosecutors. So,
well, okay.
And I don't mean to insult you as a former prosecutor.
And a rear admiral. But I do, is there a logic to... See, I've always thought of it this way. If I was trying to impugn somebody or hurt them or make a case against them, I wouldn't start with Mark Garrigus is such an asshole. I would go, I like Mark. I think Mark's a good guy. I think he does a great job. But in this case, he crossed the line. And then you go, oh, because if you start with this guy's a horrible or deplorable, then of course whatever comes next is going to be yada yada yada. Okay, right. He's dangerous or whatever it is. So is there a strategy to starting off and saying I respect my opponent, I think they did a good job, and now we'll tend to believe what comes out of you next.
Right, because you got to be authentic. And by the way, it doesn't work if you hate your opponent's guts. I mean, because a jury can tell if you're saying or if I say, oh, this prosecutor, I have so much respect for him, and they know I don't, and I can't. I can barely utter the words. That's not going to come off as authentic. But if it's somebody that you genuinely like and who's got game, and you say, look, I understand they've got a job to do, but they've got a different job than I have, and I think that you're here as a jury to remember that. That's a different approach, and I think is more authentic.
Here's an interesting angle. I heard an attorney speaking on the radio the other day, and Trump's not going to go down this road, and I don't think his attorneys are going down this road, but this attorney said, if you are going to accuse Trump of part of the accusation is the incitement, and then the other part is the basically denial of the election outcome. If you're going to charge him for denying the election outcome, then the defense may bring that in
That's
and
absolutely
say, let's examine this outcome in this election, because if you're going to accuse him of falsely denying falsely of the election, the process and the outcome, then we get to drill down on that, and then you get to make essentially a court case about the election, which you wouldn't have had a chance to do. Now, I don't know what evidence they may have.
It's amazing you say that, because that is the fact of whether denying the election is something you can then that is impeachable. That's a separate question from what you just said. A fundamental precept of evidence is if the prosecution is trying to prove a point, you can dispute that point, that element. And that's exactly what they were doing. There's another point that I'm going to throw out here that's been very irritating. And a lot of fine lawyers I've heard make this point, and they're just wrong, is, the House managers, I thought, did a nice job of talking about Michigan, and kind of that is the other acts evidence to show that this was a pattern. He knew what would happen. I heard a lot of people say, well, you can't do that. You can't bring in this other acts evidence, blah, 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 blah. Yes, you can. Under the federal 404 and in California, for instance, under 1101. And by the way, the one prosecutor who was the guy who refused to indict Cosby back in 2005, Castor, that's the central issue or one of the central issues in Cosby's appeal. Other acts evidence, and I've always had a problem with it, but the fact is that the law is quite clear to show a signature, identification, or that was what you do, or your kind of modus operandi. That's admissible. That's clearly admissible. So don't tell me that wouldn't come in a court case. Clearly it would.
I remember Jamie. Is it Jamie Raskin?
Raskin, yeah.
Yeah. The thing that stands out for me is he fixed his hair.
Oh, no, why did you and I, the first thing we fixate was the hair?
Because when I spoke in front of Congress a few years ago for No Safe Spaces, and we were talking about free speech, and at some point I started taking questions, Jim Jordan and Raskin and all these people, and at some point Raskin sort of pushed back, and he said, it's probably on tape somewhere, but he said, so just because you're a comedian, you think you have the ability to say whatever you want about anything, about, no matter how dangerous or whatever it is. And I said, and say things that would be hurtful and things like that. And I said, yeah, as a comedian, like if I was on stage right now, I'd be making fun of your hair. His hair was so... I think him and Marcia Clark must have went to the same stylist, because somebody just said, you cannot put on a case with this crazy mop that sits upon your head because you seem like an insane person. So somebody did something to find a before and after, Gary, of Jamie Raskin's hair, because circa 2015 or 17, when I was having fun with his hair,
did it look anything like it does today, 2021?
He did something in the last few years. I think somebody said, you can't be Professor Finkelheimer and get up there and deliver this stuff. You're losing credibility because we're looking at your crazy hair. So he dyed it. He moved it. I don't know what he did with it. He's probably the only guy. This is interesting. In a world where everyone on that side of the aisle hates Trump and makes fun of him about everything, he's probably the only one who didn't make fun of his hair.
Yeah.
Because he probably felt it would come back.
That it might be those in glass houses. And by the way, he was very effective, although I think the guy who gets the highest marks from what I've seen is the young man who was born in Bakersfield and then I believe represents Colorado. And I don't think he's a lawyer, but I thought he was very effective in terms of his style. I don't remember his name, and I apologize for that.
Well, so what do you? So I hear, you hear every different angle from every different pundit about, first off, is it illegal? Is it legal? Can you impeach someone who's not the president, who's a citizen? So you hear this sort of like, well, he's a citizen. You can't impeach him. And then there's so many different interpretations of.
Yeah, but this is what they forget. Once again, I said this isn't a court of law. This is not going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court unless there's only one scenario that I can think of. Maybe somebody has got a brighter mind than mine, but the precedent for whether you can impeach an ex-president is the Senate vote. The Senate voted 55 to 45 or 56 to 40, whatever it is. There you go.
Oh, he hasn't really. Wait, this is old Jamie Raskin hair? Because the newer version that was.
The newer version is darker and more.
Seems to have a direction. There's something.
You know what's great about today and the day and age of 2021? We can do this and nobody's going to push back. If this were a female, we would be excoriated and hung.
Yeah, well, that's true, although there is my Marcia Clark defense, which is I have brought her crazy hair up, too.
So can they do it? Yes, there's Senate precedent for it, and the precedent for it was this week. So that ship has sailed.
It also seems...
But I'll tell you the one issue that could still be, if they did that, then if he got convicted, which is never going to happen because conviction requires more than 60 votes, 66 votes, and it doesn't look like anybody other than Senator from Louisiana is going to change their mind or has changed their mind. Although who knows, funnier things have happened. And then they voted more than 50 that he could not hold office. That's an interesting legal question I could see before the U.S. Supreme Court.
And what about this? So I brought up the Democrats bringing up the election and disputing the outcome of the election. So they've entered that, that's now on the table for things to discuss. What about this? Saying that he incited a riot and then simultaneously saying this was pre-planned. That seems like they're poking holes in their own case by bringing up the pre-planned part. Now, it sounds more nefarious, like this was pre-planned. But then if you're defending a client and they said, well, we want to get him for arson because he fell asleep while he was smoking and he was drunk and the whole warehouse burnt down and someone was killed. And then somebody said, no, someone was planning on burning the warehouse down a few days earlier. Wouldn't that be kind of helping your case?
I thought a similar thing, that what they should be arguing is you've got the other act's evidence, which would be Michigan. So that's your 404. You bring that in, and then you say he knew exactly what he was doing. That's why he was bussing people in there. This was all premeditated. And that the speech, which was incitement, was not as much incitement as he knew exactly what he was doing. It was all pre-planned and premeditated, and the speech was just there as the ignition trigger.
So it was like the firing pistol for the start of the marathon.
Correct. And you knew what would happen. That is how you show that it was premeditated, deliberate, and that this was not a spur-of-the-moment thing. Because there were, and it's, as usual, you've got your finger on the pulse of the real issues. There were some arguments that were sloppy because they made it seem like, he lit the fire of this thing that wouldn't have happened otherwise. No, you had to built to it, and that's the only logical way to put it together.
And then you have to tie him to the building of it, to the construction of it, and so you're going to have to. They've also been talking about other Congress people and senators who were in on it, which I think they're just floating that out there because I feel like if they had something, they would show it.
It'll be interesting to see. I think one of the reasons you haven't seen, there's been reports that Georgia opened up a criminal investigation on Trump based on the phone call with the Secretary of State there. As I have mentioned a bazillion times, it's clear that the Attorney General of New York and civilly, and that the Manhattan DA have a criminal probe, and obviously the U.S. Supreme Court knows that the Manhattan DA's got a criminal probe because they allowed it to go forward, even while once he was president. What will be interesting is to see the criminal fallout post-impeachment. And I think all of the prosecutors are basically keeping their guns or their powder dry, so to speak, until they see what happens with impeachment.
Well, speaking of New York, Cuomo is now under fire because there's a whistleblower, and they're talking about his own party is talking about bringing charges against him.
This for those who aren't in the weeds on this story, I sent it to Gary, I think this morning, didn't I, Gary? Because there's so much here to unpack, and I hate to say that we were early money on all of this, but we've been early money on all this. This is what the issue was, so people understand. Yesterday, the highest unelected official in New York State, which is the aide de camp, for lack of a better term, for Cuomo, admitted that they knew, either in real time or closely thereafter, that the request from the then Trump Department of Justice for accurate documentation of nursing home deaths versus hospital deaths. And you'll say, well, what was the difference? If you believe the report, the difference was New York State was reporting 8,000 people had died in nursing homes when, in fact, it was really 12,000. What they had done is they had shifted 4,000 of people who had come directly from taken to the hospital from the nursing home. We have been talking about countless times, to the point where Paulette tells me to shut up, the fact I check all the time the city of Pasadena's health department, and I talk about 70 or 80% of the deaths are associated. They do the accurate thing, associated with assisted living or whatever. Mm-hmm. What Cuomo's assistant admitted is that they froze when they were asked this because they were afraid of where the Department of Justice was going, because, as you will remember, Governor Cuomo had ordered all assisted living facilities to accept coronavirus positive people, which there is a compelling argument that caused thousands of deaths.
Right. So somebody was infected. He said, you must return to this assisted living, and they returned, and then other people got ill. And obviously it's the most vulnerable population. It's over 80. So, there's a couple things. Also, I think the argument is they sent over the hospital ships, and they took the Javits Center and they made it into a makeshift hospital, and Cuomo didn't utilize that. So I guess the argument is instead of sending them back to the nursing home, why didn't you send them to the hospital ship? Or why didn't you use one of these facilities that the feds had set up at great taxpayer expense? And was it a political thing, and that he didn't want to use what was offered by the Trump administration? Because the ship and the Javits Center and stuff, I think that was federal stuff. So did he do it out of a political, political expediency, which is like, I'm not going to use this hospital ship that the Trump administration sent over?
Well, if you believe what she confessed to, and I think, Gary, what was the precise language? We froze. And I believe they think they had criminal liability. I don't want to overstate it, but that I based on what she said, it sounds like she thought there was criminal liability for this directive. It's ironic because at the time, Cuomo and our good Governor Newsom, remember back in real time, these guys were being lionized. Lionized for their response.
Cuomo got an Emmy. But it just goes to show you, Hollywood is so fucked up. They literally picked the worst governor to give an Emmy to. And they worshipped at the altar of this guy. He wrote a book. They were trying to set him up on dates on The View.
If I'm not mistaken, in April of 2020, there were people who were asking and lamenting Joe Biden as the nominee and wanted him to step down as the nominee at some point during the year. I read this repeatedly, and have Cuomo take his place. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
there was that argument. And by the way, as a good Dem, and I've defended him, but I've also, you and I called him out on it at the time, and I've talked about this whole, everything about this pandemic that is absolutely intellectually dishonest, you can find in the nursing homes. Nursing homes and assisted living centers. That's the first place that should have been vaccinated. Right. It's the first place that should have had no community dining. First place where you should have had, and by the way, how many times have we said, where did the first thing start in Washington, D.C., Washington State at an assisted living center? This was not brain surgery.
I know. Well, there's two things that are going on. First off, it's always funny because I watch Fox. I watch CNN and Fox. So when something like this, like Cuomo and this debacle with the nursing homes and the people going back and the miscounting of death and misappropriation, everything like that, it now becomes standard fare. It's out in the zeitgeist. CNN's reporting on it. And then I'll have people come up to me and they'll go, hey, did you hear about this whole Cuomo nursing home? I go, yeah, I did 11 months ago.
Exactly. How many of our episodes did we talk about it?
Right. These people don't watch anything other than CNN. So it's like, this is breaking news in your world. In my world, I've been hearing about this shit for a year.
Well, I watch Fox rarely. And I watch CNN at this point rarely. I do watch MSNBC and I watch BBC. But this is what bugs me about the way the news is put out there. This story started about this rapidly spreading virus in the state of Washington in a, whatever you want to call it, assisted living center. We knew from the get-go those were the most vulnerable, right? Was there any? It wasn't more than 2 weeks in that you knew this.
Here's what I think. I have screamed about this from the rooftop since this thing started. I have said, where are the ages? Give me the ages. And you've heard me scream about it. Gary's heard me scream about it 1,000 times, and not even with the microphone, just in the hall. So
how about Adam's favorite CNN piece? Where the ages?
Oh, my
96, God. 95.
So he likes to make balloons, balloon animals.
He'll never make another poodle out of a balloon ever again. Yes, I get it. People die, and then when you die, you have to almost immediately stop doing what you were doing. So I love vintage cars and making fun of my family. You love great order. Yeah. It's all going to end one day, Mark. I got bad news for you.
Well, but can we just keep there? I also sent Gary this morning, and it was in the New York Times. Finally, where are we? We are 1 month shy of the declaration of a national emergency. I believe it March 13th of 2020 was the declaration of a national emergency. New York Times today, in breaking news, does a column. Who wrote it, Gary?
I will.
COVID absolutism.
I will wrap this up by saying, when people were dying, and it was like, man from Gardena dies, man from Upland dies, I kept saying, what are the ages? What are the ages? What are the ages? Because they would always, if it was a car accident or something, they would say 52-year-old man from Upland died while driving his pickup truck. I said, where are the ages? And everyone kept saying, I don't know, who cares? Like, why is that important? And then they kept saying HIPAA laws. And is it HIPAA?
HIPAA.
Yeah, HIPAA law. Sorry. They say HIPAA laws. And I would go, what do you mean? Why is that an infraction of a HIPAA law to say the age? Don't even say the person's name. Say the age. We didn't get the ages. And the reason we didn't get the ages is because they wanted everyone sufficiently panicked. It does not induce panic if you say this preys on people that are 75 plus. It does not induce panic in my kids. They're 14. So the job was to get everyone sufficiently scared so that they could do what the fuck we told them to do. And the reason we weren't getting ages is because that wouldn't scare people enough. And it's probably the reason they never really drilled down on the assisted living homes, the old age homes, and retirement homes, which they should have. But if they would have done that, then it would have let us know that this is mainly a disease that is attacking old people or killing old people. So they didn't want to drill down on that.
I'm going to, after I do this ad, I also want to build on that because...
Mark, your New York Times article, by the way, is David Leonhardt.
It's worth a read.
It is worth a read. It's
good. Worth a read because it's amazing 11 months after the fact where they are, and I'll get to that in a second. Do you own or rent your home? Sure you do. Unless you are subsidized by the city of Los Angeles. And I bet it can be hard work. Yeah, it is hard work. But it's not as hard as living out on the streets. You know what's easy? Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowners or your renter's insurance along with your auto policy. It's a great move. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home, don't you?
Oh, God.
We know you do. I don't, but you do. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico easy. Visit geico.com today. That's Geico, GEICO.com. Geico. So,
and Gary, something to put on deck.
Sure.
Another thing we talked about was Officer Sicknick. Remember when I said, sound like he died of a stroke or a heart attack? And then, oh, no, CNN, they swooped us on that one. No, he was viciously attacked with a fire extinguisher.
Mark, what did I text you last night?
That's what killed him. Blunt force trauma.
Blunt force trauma.
Blunt force trauma is exactly
I was on this goddamn show saying,
Gary had the over and under at 30 minutes on blunt force trauma.
It sounded like he had a stroke in the locker room or something. It's like, no. He was attacked, viciously attacked with a fire extinguisher. That is some goddamn crack reporting.
This is what bothers me because you can't have a sane conversation. I'm happy that, is it Leonhardt wrote this article today because it really exposes exactly what the problem is. In a world in which you want zero risk from anything, COVID absolutism flourishes. The COVID absolutism is he even talks about it. People screaming at you when you're outside if you're not wearing a mask, even though you're not within 600 feet of somebody.
Once you get vaccinated, you still got to wear a mask.
Right.
Like all that stuff. Of course.
How about the people in La Cañada, the La Cañada Karens, who are driving around in their car with not one but two masks alone in their car with the windows pulled up and honking at me because I'm walking the dog without a mask.
And by the way,
the
excuse I always hear with the why do you wear a mask alone in a car? That's so I don't forget to put it on. All right, well, how about why don't you stuff some fucking toilet paper down your pants so later on when you take a shit, you don't forget to wipe your ass. Jesus Christ, how stupid do you have to be?
So what bothers me, though, is when you try to engage with anybody who is a COVID absolutist and you explain, well, we've got to do this. You got to protect. I understand we got to protect, but we were misled, purposefully misled. Now we have evidence that we were purposely misled, and we knew what to do, and we didn't do it, and we haven't done it all along. And by the way, you want to start talking about, I had it this week at the Court of Appeal. I had a justice read me, 400,000 deaths is an important case. And it's like, okay, I understand that. I got all that. But the Constitution didn't get repealed because a bunch of stupid-ass politicians or unelected county bureaucrats don't know what the fuck they're doing and make decisions that actually force more death upon us. There is a cogent, compelling argument to anybody who is rational that the politicians increase the deaths exponentially by their decisions in real time that anybody rational would have said this is insanity.
Well, let's hear the article because I'm now
read some of these things, Gary. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's a little long. I hesitate to read the whole thing, but basically it sort of analogizes COVID to the AIDS epidemic and the fact that it was never going to work to tell people that all sex was bad, so that led to an increase in unsafe sex in the time where we needed safe sex the most. Basically, by demonizing it, you're going against yourself. And
And even says that there's a quote in there, something about the only people, and we said this, God, I hate to say, go back and run the tape. We were saying early on, this has all the feel to me of the craziness of HIV, because I remember defending and being on the plaintiff during that time when people were being criminally prosecuted because they wouldn't do this, they wouldn't work on somebody. And it's the same thing. And they say the only people who seem to be rational here, or who have actually started to understand that this does seem to replicate the whole HIV/AIDS panic porn that we went through, are the people who lived through that and who understood it. Gary, there's so many good quotes in this article.
Yeah, there are. He also calls it hygiene theater, talking about how the New York City subway system shuts down every night so that workers can perform a deep cleaning, even though there's absolutely no evidence that that's actually doing anything.
Oh, God. I mean, when this, go back to March and people are taking the Grubhub bags in my house and spritzing them down. It's like I feel like a futuristic traveler who's come to live in a village of superstitious natives, and they're going, we got to throw a goat in the volcano so we can have a better harvest this year. And I'm like, are you nuts?
They talk about, he does a whole shtick on outdoors. He says there's no evidence anywhere in the world of outdoor transmission except when you're in close proximity for a period of time.
Having conversation and mixing with indoor. Now, here's the quote you were talking about earlier from the HIV section. I've noticed that some of the clearest voices against COVID absolutism are researchers who have spent much of their career studying HIV, including Civic, Julius Marcus, Sarah Golub, and Aaron Reiterman. They know the history. The demonization of sex during AIDS contributed to more unsafe sex. If all sex is bad, why focus on safe sex? There's a similar dynamic with COVID. People do not have unlimited energy, so why should we ask them to be vigilant where it matters most? We should ask them to be vigilant where it matters most.
And there's a whole section.
We're going back to the
nursing homes.
Right.
We could have saved, my humble opinion, you could have saved hundreds of thousands of lives if this had just focused on the nursing homes. And by the way, people die. My mom died. They get into your 90s, you are susceptible to virtually anything in your 90s because that's what growing old is. And so why not protect the most vulnerable, who are also, by the way, the ones who are most vulnerable and susceptible to this?
He also points out, and I think it's a good point, that spending money on things like deep cleaning the New York subway system every night is taking money away from things that would actually help, like increasing the speed of vaccinations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, we're in Los Angeles, which was yesterday ran out of vaccines. Yeah, that's our right. Can you imagine running your business where, okay, we got to push. We're going to get the shots into the arms. The shots into the arm. We're the epicenter of COVID. Oops, we ran out. See you next week.
On a slightly other subject, and I hear these stories all the time, and I think, oh, what's Mark going to say? So yes, I'm not done with Officer Sicknick because I said doesn't sound like blunt force trauma, and then shame on me because I try to connect the dots because I believe CNN isn't lying. So I go, well, maybe he got bonked on the head. And then he went back to his office.
That's what I had assumed.
Sent his brother a text and then died the next day of some sort of hemorrhage or something caused by the bonk on the head. Also, no blunt force trauma. I don't know why the autopsy is not released. And this is for you, Mark. There was one person who was killed, and that was the woman from San Diego who was crawling through the window and shot in the face by the cop. By the way, no outrage on the left that a cop just shot a woman dead who was unarmed. No problemo. It's fine. They're super consistent in that department. Shot the chick in the face who was unarmed, who was coming through the window. By the way, I love the left. They're like, well, she shouldn't have been coming through the window. You're the same people who said, hey, this black guy got shot as he was taking a nap at a drive-thru, and the cops just came in and shot him. You think that's right? Okay.
What was
Be a
Garrett?
little consistent. Sorry.
Young Ryan just informed me that the CapitolPolice.gov website, which is a governmental website, says that Officer Sicknick died as a result of injuries sustained.
Right. Except for he didn't have injuries. Now, there is some thought about he inhaled, bear spray or pepper spray or something.
I'd love to talk. Who would be most knowledgeable about this that we could actually have a reasoned conversation?
I'm just curious of how we got to the fire extinguisher, and I know how we got to the fire extinguisher. It's a better theme for CNN. They like the theme. These animals broke in, they attacked him viciously, and then you can watch all the politicians go savagely attacked with it. Okay, it didn't happen. The scary part is if you found an American 5 years from now and you go, that Capitol policeman, how did he die? He got hit with a fire extinguisher. That's what they would say.
I just want to. I said it at the time that I wanted to see, or I wanted to talk to somebody. But we should identify.
I have a question, and yes, I would love to talk to someone who could speak this. All right. First off, release the autopsy. I don't know why. Why can't we be privy to that?
We may get that if somebody gets prosecuted.
We'll get it eventually when we're done.
Yeah.
When they're done with it, then we'll get it. How about this? And this is a Mark question. What about the name of the cop who shot the woman in the face? How come that's not released?
I'm surprised there hasn't been a lawsuit. I'm really surprised there hasn't been a lawsuit.
Well, there might be, but what about his name?
Yeah.
We always know the names of the cops who shoot the poor unarmed black people. Why don't we know the name of this guy?
Speaking of which, they published the article. Remember the guy who got pushed down, the 75-year-old man in Buffalo? Those two cops were not filed on.
He was walking toward them, and they sort of bulldozed over him.
Yeah. And so somebody tweeted that, I want to hear that. What about that now? Okay, fine. Read the article. You know what they did? They did exactly what the attorney general or DA did in the Breonna Taylor case. They put it in front of a grand jury so they could let the grand jury take the fall and not do it. That's what happened there. That wasn't any judge who threw it out or a jury who acquitted him. It was a grand jury who, I'll bet you, if you push back, just like Breonna Taylor, nobody asked for the homicide charges or for assault charges.
So why no release of the name of the officer who shot the woman in the face?
I have no idea, which is why there's so much we don't know that we need to. All I can think of is you take a more cynical view than me.
Yes.
That it's a media narrative. I personally think that it's the usual kind of law enforcement closing of the ranks, and when law enforcement closes the ranks, you can fight until you're blue in the face.
Well, I'll meet you in the middle, which is the officer and the enforcement. Yes, they close ranks. They circle the wagons. The media puts pressure on them, and when the media puts enough pressure on them, oftentimes we do get the release of the autopsy or the release of the officer's name. The media doesn't want to know the officer's name. That's what I'm saying.
I can see that argument.
My conspiracy theory is they ain't interested. They're interested now. If he shot an unarmed black woman on the street of Philadelphia, the media super interested in his name. He shoots a Trump supporter. Somehow their curiosity's gone away.
See, you take that. I take it's the cops. The cops in Buffalo.
I think it's both.
Cops in Buffalo, they put enough pressure on the public prosecutor. We're going to wash this out in the grand jury. Same thing with Breonna Taylor. They put enough pressure so that the guy knows, I got to have the grand jury wash this out, which is why you have these incredible, instances of grand juries having to sue.
I do agree with you. I think it's both, but it's hard when you hear about. So you take two cops, two officers that were there, that were, one of them killed somebody, the other was killed. All right, and here's where my kind of conspiracy theory stuff comes in. You have two Capitol policemen. One of them shoots a 30-something-year-old woman in the face. CNN, not interested. Not interested in the woman, not interested in the cop, not interested in any of that narrative whatsoever. Then you have another cop who died. CNN, very interested in that, and they like the narrative of the wild mob attacking and killing a police officer. So then they go running with the bonked on the head with the fire extinguisher, and it makes you kind of wonder, well, they're both cops. They're both there. If you're interested in cops at the mall are really unpacking what happened, I think you could get to the bottom of whether someone had blunt force trauma or zero trauma to the head, and you could also find out about the cop who shot the woman. They're interested in one, they're not interested in the other. In one, they do no fact checking. On the other, they manufacture facts and attach it to the case. And I feel like that's a theme.
And if that's the case, that's why I say I want to talk to somebody so that we can drill down on it. You know, at least, as you say, with some of these other subjects, there are statistics you can look at. There is data you can look at. There is common sense. I really would love to know what and we may find out because, like I said, there may be people criminally charged in connection with this, and if that's the case, they're going to have to produce it.
The first thing that made me kind of suspicious about the Sicknick thing is, if somebody savagely attacked him with a fire extinguisher, then that person's going to be in jail. I mean, they should actively be looking for that person. They should be scrubbing through the video. You know, if this guy was being attacked with a thing, there's got to be some video footage of that, some eyewitness, something. We would know who that guy was, who did that, right? So when I didn't hear any terms of prosecution or here's the guy we're looking for or an APB or whatever, it started to make me wonder, well, why you're going after everyone else? Why not go after the guy who did the killing in there? Or maybe it didn't go down that way. That's what made me suspicious. Do they? And then look, I may be wrong. Maybe CNN is actively looking for the name is demanding we get the name of the cop that shot the woman in the face. But
no, I dug pretty deep here for over the last 15 minutes or so, and eventually I was able to identify his rank is lieutenant, but that's all you can find.
All right, well, look,
so
CNN
by next week we will get to Gary. Gary will find somebody who can speak authoritatively.
We will work on that.
I'm just saying. Someone. For a network that seems obsessed with cops shooting citizens, not so interested in this particular instance of a cop shooting a citizen. That's all. It's a narrative. I just think it's a narrative. Look, the right has a narrative. The left has a narrative. And we're so deep in our narrative now that
we can't seem to get facts or anything that resembles a fact.
Yeah. I mean, kill with a fire extinguisher. All right. And also, this thing where it's like, unnamed sources who were there say, and then you get to just run with it. I don't know. I don't feel like that. It's funny. I was laughing with Dr. Drew about it because when an elder statesman at CNN retired 2 weeks ago, the guy presided over CNN for many years and blah, blah, blah. And he was getting a sort of softball interview. And it's like, well, what has made CNN? It's like, our vigorous vetting of the facts, that we don't put something out there until we vigorously vet it. They've been wrong about so much shit over the last year. It's ungoddamn believable. All right. Next week, Mark will make fun of Fox. Let me talk about Chamonix. Ah, yes, puffiness and bags under the eyes. The hardest things to get rid of until now. Genucell, by the way, is the product. Plant stem cell therapy from Chamonix. Specifically targets eye puffiness in bags. Incredibly powerful natural serum guaranteed to show results in as little as 12 hours or your money back. I got Lynette. Well, they sent some of the stuff over, and Lynette uses it, and she swears by it. And she doesn't swear by a lot, so let's go with this, would you? 8 extra ingredients to reduce appearances of bags, puffiness. Plus, Genucell uses patented plant stem cell technology to improve longevity and long-term results. Try Genucell, and you can try it risk-free. Just go to Genucell.com/Adam. Enter the special promo at checkout, ADAM40. Adam40. Right, Gary?
That's right. Say goodbye to puffiness and bags today. From now until Mother's Day, get the legendary Genucell XV face cream absolutely free. Chamonix, the best skincare, best results, or your money back. That's Genucell.com/Adam, GENUCEL.com/Adam.
All right. You can find me February 26th, 27th, Oklahoma City, Bricktown Comedy Club, doing my stand-up. You can go to adamcarolla.com. I'm going to Reno. I'm going to Waukegan, Illinois. I'm going to Royal Oak, Kansas City, all over this man's land and doing stand-up. So you can go there and you can subscribe to our YouTube page, youtube.com/Adam Carolla for a bunch of free stand-up. Mark?
You know, I'm very, very disappointed. We had an offer. Mike August said that you and I had an offer to go salmon fishing. Did you hear this offer?
Oh, yeah. We're going to Alaska.
Yeah. Then I realized, and I was very intrigued by this. And then I realized, Tenny's getting married that same week.
Oh, well, bring her salmon fishing. Ladies love salmon.
Nothing like a little spawn. By the way, dining, right? Indoor in New York, Prova, Grand Central Terminal, Moxie at the Hotel Times Square, Engine Company 28 come by and help the cause, 10E, Mediterranean Tapas on 7th Street. And if you're in Palm Springs, special Valentine's Day at the V at Gigi's.
So, until next time, Adam Carolla for Mark Garrigus saying, Mahala.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode.